Hi, Matt with the etrailer. If you have a 2021 Chevrolet Silverado and you're looking for a way to transport those longer items, anything like ladders or lumber, but at a more affordable price point, then the etrailer truck rack is going to be a great option for you. So let's check it out. What I really like about a ladder rack is it's going to offer you a lot more opportunities when you're trying to load your gear on your vehicle. So what I mean specifically for a truck is, yes, you do have a lot of space in your bed, but what's going to happen a lot of times is if you have anything that's extra long, like lumber, ladders, or even a kayak, is going to stick out from the back of your bed. Especially with the one we have today, this is going to be a 5.5-foot bed. So most items won't fit in here super neat. And what I also like about a ladder rack is it pretty much double the amount of space or real estate that you have. So any items that you can put on your bed, now you can also stack up on top of your ladder rack as long as it fits across your crossbars. But what's neat about the one we have today is it actually has a cantilever, and with a cantilever, this is essentially almost doubling the amount of space that we have back here. So compared to other ones where you're not going to have a cantilever, or ones that do have a cantilever, this is going to come at a much more bang for your buck price range. But let's kind of go over some of the parts, what makes this one unique compared to other ones. So today I'll just be talking about the top, then I'll be talking about the legs, and then I'll be talking about the feet at the very bottom. So starting with the top, we're going to have this bar that reaches across on either side. What this is doing for us is acting as a type of load stop. Now, a lot of other ones might have load stops on them. They're going to be adjustable. That's nice, but what you get from that adjustability is not a type of sturdiness that we have with these. These are not going to move no matter how much you push on them, because this is their spot that they stay at. So they're going to be very sturdy, and we're going to have this bar that reaches all the way across to right here. And this is going to act as a type of handle when you're trying to get up in your bed, especially when you are doing a lot of work back here, or if you have some tools to the maybe closer to your bulkhead that you can't really reach from the side. Another reason to get in your bed. We'll also have a few tie-down points right here. They're going to be different size holes, so if you have different size types of hooks, you'll have different options to hook to. And on top of that, if you want to use any ropes to tie off through here or just hang any type of hooks, you'll have that opportunity right here, and also in a couple different locations on our rack. And we are going to have 4 sets of crossbars. Now the one on the back and the very front, those won't be adjustable. The 2 in the center will be adjustable. Now this one right next to me, this can adjust a little bit. It's really going to be defined by the size of your bed, so it's going to be a one-time adjustment. Now for the one right past that, here you can adjust this forward or back some whenever you need to. Just keep in mind you just have to loosen up some nuts and bolts to adjust it, so it might take a second. But if you find that you have something that has a lot of flex to it, some type of piping or some thinner wood, a lot of times it might make contact with your wood if you don't have that support. So that's another reason why I like a cantilever, and the fact that we can adjust this just in case our item that we are hauling just falls a little bit short of where it is at the moment. And now we're going to move down to our legs. So we're going to have a cleat on the outside. That's great to tie off to if you have any types of ropes. I also see a lot of people using this to put their type of cables or any type of hoses on the side of their vehicle. You can do that. Just make sure if you are doing that, to tie it off with something else like a zip tie, just for that extra security. And then here at the bottom, you'll see we have these feet. Now these feet are pretty nice because they don't require us to drill into our bed rails. You do have the option, there are a couple holes throughout it. They can make some holes, drill into it, if you want something that's not going to leave your bed ever. But I'm not a big fan of that, especially since if you are drilling into something, it's going to be more prone to rusting over time. And on top of this, this makes for a lot simpler of an installation too. Now there are a couple of things to think about the placement of these feet, because like I said, this is adjustable to a degree, and right now we have this covering up our stake pocket. If you're not a big fan of that, you can, when you are installing this, just measure this out and make sure this is pushed a little bit more forward. But as you can see, we are covering that almost completely, and you might be limited on the amount of space that you can save here. Now let's talk about some of the measurements of this rack. So when it comes to your crossbar, that's going to be roughly around 50 inches. That's important to know because when you are putting items back here, like any wide pieces of plywood, you need to make sure it's going to fit up here. And then next up, we can talk about the total height this is going to add. So if I measure just from the bottom of my bed to the top of this rack, that's going to be a little bit over 55.5 inches. So that's something to think about if you're going through any low clearance areas. What I suggest doing is taking the height of the bed, then taking the height of your rack, but then also adding anything that's on top of here. So if you have anything that goes above your load stops, include that into your measurement, just so you don't make contact with anything anywhere like a garage. And then the next measurement I want to get is going to be the space underneath your rack. So if we go from the bottom of our bed to the bottom of our rack, that's going to be a little bit under 49 inches. That's important to know if you have any taller items. So let's say you have a fridge and you want to put it back here. A lot of times that's not going to fit. So just make sure you take that into account before you load your items here. And then the last measurement I want to get is going to be the height from our roof. That's going to be a little bit under 5 inches. So if you have anything that's kind of dangling under here, kind of think about that. But in most cases, this should be enough clearance not to make contact with anything. And when it comes to weight capacity, this is going to be able to handle quite a bit. That capacity is going to be around 1,000 pounds. Now, that's probably never going to exceed what your bed is rated for, but it is important to think about what your bed is rated for. The reason being is if you already have a lot of items in your bed, let's say some concrete or mulch, that's going to weigh that down. And if you're trying to max out what this ladder rack can handle, then you might run into some issues there. So just make sure you know what your vehicle can handle. Now, in my opinion, I think this is a pretty solid option if you're looking for something that's going to be a little more affordable, but can get you a lot of capabilities that other ladder racks have. Now, if you're looking for something that's going to have a lot more ease of use and even be more flexible, then I'd actually recommend the Thule Track 1 ladder rack. There's going to be a version of that that actually has a track system built into the towers that you can actually push forward toward the bulkhead side, and it's also going to have a cantilever on it and a higher weight capacity. The thing to think about with that one, though, is it's going to be at a much more premium price range. So if you're a little more established and you've been doing this for a little bit, that might be a nice upgrade for you. But if you're just starting out, I think this is a great place to start. Now, if you are curious to see how you're going to put this on your vehicle, you actually just stay tuned. We'll walk you through that process. The first thing I like to start off with is just making sure that my ladder rack is already loosened up. So when you originally assemble this, just make sure you leave those pivot points loose so you can adjust things. You can see here, I can move these arms and legs in and out. And that's important because when we move it up there, we might have to make some adjustments. But you don't want to leave it too loose or it'll be kind of difficult to really line up with your bed rails. And what I like to do is just get my measurements beforehand. I already measured mine out, and this is going to work with what I have, but the two measurements I'm going to be checking for is going to be the distance from the inside to make sure this is going to line up with my bed, and that's still looking pretty good. And then the second measurement I'm going to get is going to be the distance between. What I do a lot of times is just find where the clamps are going to sit in, and just make sure that's going to work for my placement, especially on the truck that we have today, because there are a couple points where the bed kind of pushes out a bit more where you won't be able to get clamps underneath. Once you've measured out for that, then we can actually start getting up there. Now, when you're going to put it on your bed, I actually recommend grabbing a friend. Today I got Kyle to help me out. And then we're just going to have one person on one side, one person on the other side, and we're just going to slowly put this up here. The big key to this is just taking your time. And now we're just going to lift it up and walk it over here. We're just making sure that this is in line with our bed rails. And we're just going to guide it over the top until this is roughly in place. And then we can make any minor adjustments if need be. We can move over to installing our J-hooks. Now, I already have my driver's side installed, but it's going to be the same process for your passenger side. I will say it's going to be a little bit easier now since everything's kind of in place, so this shouldn't shift as much. So I recommend actually doing one side at a time. But to do this, we're going to make sure everything's measured out correctly. So what I like to do is to make sure that I measure from the front of my foot to my cab to make sure it's even on either side, and then we can start installing this. Also, watch out for underneath here. This is what I was talking about earlier, how this section here is extended out. You won't be able to get your clamps underneath there. Instead, we want to look for a spot more like this. And even then, when you get it under there, as you can see, I'm kind of making contact with a tab somewhere over here. Right here's one of them. We want to make sure we avoid those. So when I put this on here, it should sit under here relatively flush and flat. Another thing to watch out for is, you'll notice this has a pretty decent gap right here too. We want to make sure this is as flush as possible. That's why we left our foot a little bit loose to begin with. And then I'm going to start installing everything. So I'm going to start with a flat washer, go to a spring washer, and then finish off with a nut. Once you have all these installed, I just recommend hand tightening this to begin with. And then we'll pick it up on this next one, and then we'll move over to the rear side. The back side nearest to your tailgate is going to be a little bit more difficult. Reason being, you're going to have a lot more resistance trying to get in place. That's moved more than I thought. The reason why you have more resistance back here is going to be because right up here, we're going to have this bolt here. And since these are two separate pieces, they're trying to fight and pull against from each other. So these initially are just going to want to fight you and separate. So when you're doing this, what I recommend to do is apply pressure with your body weight, and then with your other hand, start installing everything. And then we can kind of cinch this down into place. Now once we have these installed on all four corners, then we can come back through with a socket and wrench. That's going to be a 19mm one. And then we can finish off the job, make sure everything is as tight as possible. And really the last thing to do is just to tighten all the bolts you have in place. So all those pivot points we have on our ladder rack from your assembly, we're going to tighten that down to make sure it's not going to shift at all. I also recommend just kind of going to the back of your carrier and looking it over and to make sure it's not shifted in any way, so you have a nice level surface you're putting your items on. And when that's done, give it a good shake test. Make sure it feels pretty good. I like the way mine feels now. And then you can take it out for a ride. But that's just a look at the installation and some of the features of the eTrailer truck rack on the back of our 2021 Chevrolet Silverado. I'm Matt. Thanks for watching.